Hello and welcome back to another episode of Your Queer Story. We are the podcast that inspires peace, love, and radicalism.
And we're your host. I'm Evan Jones.
And I'm Paul Hobbs. And this week we're talking about Barbara Smith.
Barbara Smith.
Before we dive in, you've got about another 12 minutes of commentary.
You got to hang in there. Yeah, it's always good. If you hate the beginning commentary, then, just go ahead and click to 10 minutes ahead because it's always at least 10 minutes.
At least.
Just hit that little 10. And if you love the commentary, then you should subscribe to our Patreon so that you can hear Behind the Queens, which is our Patreon exclusive content where we just talk out our ass about whatever we want.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
Straight conversation. We always try to pick a topic, but it never sticks to that topic.
No, all over the place. Yeah.
But you know what? It's 15 extra minutes of content every single week.
Yeah.
And, it's personal stories. It helps our podcast, which then, we can use to help the queer community. Evan's currently putting in an application to have a booth at the transgender convention.
The Trans Philly Conference, and I'm petitioning to do a workshop there.
Yes, so there you go.
So if you go to the Trans Philly Conference, I have not got it yet. So I have no idea if I'm going to get it. But if I do get selected to do a workshop, then I will let you guys know. And if you go there, check it out. It's a free conference, but obviously you have to find accommodations while you're in Philly. But if you can get there, the conference is free, and it's the biggest trans conference in North America. So
there you go.
Yeah.
And wherever you're listening, please make sure you give us a little like, and a subscribe, and leave us a review. If you're listening on Spotify, I know Spotify doesn't have reviews. You can tweet us a review. You can go on iTunes and leave a review. Stitcher has reviews.
Yep.
If you want to go out of your way, it'll help us a lot. Likes, reviews, and things like that help all of those behind the scene algorithms when they decide which podcast to show up on the list. So every little bit helps. That
helps boost us. And of course, downloading always helps as well. So downloading wherever you go. And make sure, we know we've been pushing this hard, but honestly, our new merch store is amazing because Paul has put so many things on there. There's so many items from stickers and notebooks to hoodies and t-shirts and coffee mugs, everything that you can think of.
Yep. And these items regularly go on sale. So before we could only offer t-shirts for like $25, but on this new site, when things go on sale, you can get stickers for like shirts for like $13. We have stickers for $2.
Yep.
We have.
Yeah, I bought a sticker. Go ahead. I bought a sticker because I was like, you can put the sticker on like your laptop or something. If you're one of those people that loves to cover your laptop or your water bottle, you can buy one of these cheap little stickers. I got one to put on a notebook, but you can also buy a notebook.
Yeah, and keep an eye out around Pride season because I am adding like some generic Pride merch. So if you don't want to represent the podcast, but you want a cute shirt,
Yeah, you can do that. And when he says that it goes on sale regularly, we're talking like a couple times a month. Every month this goes on sale.
For like a week long.
Yeah, big drops. And then like the first time that you use the website, there's also a sale.
15% off.
So there's a lot for you guys, anytime you want to go on there. But yeah, and you have your new Suckling Sapphists.
Yes,
merch.
That one's really cute.
Very femme. And very, very cute. I like it. So if you're a proud Suckling Sapphist.
My little sister wanted it because she thought it was so cute.
Yeah. That's sweet. But yeah, and of course, if you want exclusive behind the scenes content like our Behind the Queens, or if you want my Coffee with Evan, which just made a new video.
We already talked about this.
We didn't talk about, we talked about the very beginning, we talked about how we have Behind the Queens, but we didn't talk about subscribing to our Patreon.
Yes, we did.
For as low as $3 a month?
Yeah.
Yes. Whatever. You know what? You guys do what you want.
So what'd you do this week, Evan?
Let me tell you about my week. All right.
Yes, you said you had this great story for me, so I am all ears.
Now, so I went to a movie with my friend. I have a good friend of mine, and we went to this movie together, and they had texted me, and they're like, do you want to go see this movie? They're like, do you want to go see The Boy? And I'm like, oh, Bad Boys, like whatever, 15, whatever it is now. And I was like, yeah, sure, Bad Boys is great. So we get to the movie, and we're sitting down, and they're showing. The
movie's called The Boy.
They're showing these previews, and I'm like, and it's like one horror preview after another, and I'm starting to be like, this is odd. Like, why would they be showing all these horror previews when we're watching an action movie? And then all of a sudden, it's like that. there was this moment of sheer panic, and I looked over at my friend and I was like, Andy, what movie are we watching? And they go, The Boy. And I was like, no, like Bad Boys? And they're like, no, The Boy. And Andy knows I hate horror movies, knows that I hate them with a passion. And I like look it up, and of course it's about this haunted fucking doll. It's The Boy 2, which I guess that's why I thought they said Bad Boys 2. I thought it was just a typo in the message. And they're like, you said you wanted to go see The Boy. And I was like, why would I want to see this? You know I hate horror. You know. So then for the next 2 hours, I had to sit curled up in my chair with my hands in my ears and my eyes half closed.
You did not.
Yes, I did. Watching this demon fucking doll haunt this little boy.
Upset. You have never watched a horror movie with me, but you watched a horror movie.
I feel like was tricked.
I feel like you cheated on me.
No.
This is a new level of low.
Trust me, if the tickets were not already bought and we were not about to watch the movie, there is no way in hell I would have watched this fucking thing. No way in hell.
I feel cheated on.
I didn't know there was a movie called The Boy. I don't want to, Paul. It was traumatic. I'm constantly turning around looking to see if there's a doll somewhere that's gonna haunt me for no fucking reason. It was very hard. So that was my week. Anyways,
that one event was your whole week. That was triggering.
Is that?
Let's see. So yesterday was the premiere of RuPaul's Drag Race season 12. Mm-hmm. So we went to Mirror Bar to watch that, and that was great. But then we found out that their kitchen's not open on Fridays. But you know what that means?
No food.
You can't get fucking grilled cheese. They have 50-cent grilled cheese there, and it is so good.
Oh.
And we would go on Thursdays, and we would watch Drag Race, and we would each get like 3 grilled cheese. That was like the thing.
Wait, so now, so Drag Race is going to be on Fridays now?
Yeah.
Oh, well, they're going to have to open their kitchen.
Exactly. I'm like, hello, I came here for the grilled cheese. I could have watched this at home if I didn't want the grilled cheese.
Yeah. Yeah, that's...
But then we went to this place called Zacco's Tacos, and we had great tacos, but then they ordered like a plate of crickets, like the bugs.
Uh-huh.
And they're like...
Who is they?
Naoki.
Oh, okay. Okay, you just didn't want to name it. Okay.
But yeah, they're like... crickets, and then I guess they're like they go on the tacos. They're like
it's just crunchy.
Yeah, they're like fried, or I don't know how they're made, but I was like, they like were trying to get me to eat one, and I was like, I cannot. And they like were like, eat one. I didn't do it.
No.
Because I just in my head could imagine when you step on a grasshopper how like guts and how squishy
no,
it is.
It's not.
I know, but where does all that go? It fucking cooks into it. No thanks.
It evaporates into it. It's like,
no, that's disgusting. I would never in a million years eat a fucking bug. And
I've
I know
eaten crickets.
that's like some cultures, like everybody does that. Like,
yeah,
I get that. Maybe I'm sure if I grew up around that culture, I would be fine with that. It was traumatic.
But not for you.
That was like equally as traumatic to me as that was for you.
I felt like when I ate crickets, I felt like I was eating sunflower seeds. Like if
that's
you didn't
what they were saying.
Yeah.
They were like, it's like literally sunflower seeds. And I was like, nope, can't do it.
No. And there we go. Guess we both just had a real rough week.
I actually did a lot of stuff this week. So I actually did start taking some anxiety medicine, and let me tell you, it has been literally life-changing.
Yeah.
Because I now notice how much anxiety I had all the time. And it also doesn't help the fact that I also will listen to like 5 hours of true crime a day at work. Like listening to people, like these horrible stories of people murdered. Like I'm sure that also leads to it, because now I can feel when anxiety is coming on. And I'm like, okay, so let's see. Why did I have so many anxiety problems? 1, I needed anxiety medication.
Yeah.
2, I listened to so much true crime. But 3, I was also drinking like 8 cups of coffee a day. And I'm just like, I don't know why I have so much anxiety all the time.
I can't get it. What?
I take 4 shots of espresso before I leave the house. Then I drink a coffee at work. And then 2 hours later, I have another coffee. Why do I have so much anxiety?
It's bizarre, really.
It's crazy how when one thing goes down, you can like realize the other factors in your life that are contributing to an issue.
Yeah. I agree.
Because of that, I was like, okay, so this is what it feels like to not be anxious. And then, like, I realized other things that were making me. It was just, like, literally life-changing.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Everybody should go to therapy.
Yes, I've been saying that for years. But, yes, everybody should go to therapy. 100%. I don't care what it is, whether it's a support group, whether it's a counselor, if it's a licensed therapist, depending on what your past is. But, yeah, you should. I have a set schedule now, and that has been life-changing for me.
When I first I agree, because if you've never, I mean, maybe in high school if you worked retail, you probably think about it today and you're like, oh, that was, or a shift job, through your college or whatever. Today, if it's years later, you're probably like, oh, that wasn't so bad. But it is horrible.
Oh my God, it's awful.
Because when I switched to a 9 to 5, my life changed. Like, I was like, oh, so I just automatically know when I work and when I actually get off. Like, it's not different every week, and I don't have to plan my entire fucking existence around the needs of this company.
And there's not this constant stress that you're going to have plans and then you're going to have to cancel your plans because something else at work is going to come up. Yeah, I mean, I get up between 5 and 6 every day. I've been able to go to the gym. I've been able to do my morning reading and meditation every single day. Like... everything is so much better. I mean, and I love my job. Absolutely love it. It's amazing. But also just like knowing I can go home and leave work at work.
And then you don't have to think about it. You're like literally gone.
And then when I'm at work, I'm able to focus on work because I'm not trying to do all the things that I like. It was like this constant cycle where like I was at work and I was trying to do my personal stuff because I didn't have time in my personal time because I had to work. And it's this vicious cycle. Yep. Like I don't understand. I can no longer understand how a company thinks that that's beneficial to themselves as a company. Right. How does that help your organization when you never give your people time off? Mm-hmm. You never give them space. You never let them have, like time for themselves. You just shoot yourself in the foot. You drain their productivity.
By the end of my retail career, I would sit in the office because, well, one, I knew I was done. Yeah. Like I knew I was done, but I would sit in the office for like an hour, 2-3 hours doing shit that I had to do. Yeah. Because when else was I going to fucking do it? Because when I was going to do it last night, I had to work a fucking double because so-and-so called off. Yeah. So you tell me when I'm supposed to get this shit done.
Exactly. My productivity, my last 6 to 8 months tanked. And when I say my productivity, I mean like my store that I manage, our numbers fell. That company hurt itself because they couldn't just give me the time that I needed to recuperate. So you lost sales because you couldn't give me the time that I needed.
And then the manager too.
Yeah. And then you had to pay all that money and time into hiring and training a new person when you could have just given a person a fucking day off. Mm-hmm. But yeah, whatever. We're good. We're better now.
Yeah, we're so much better. So
fuck the corporations. And
get out of there. You're not. If you're.
Oh God. Get out now. If you can, yeah.
If you can get out now, and especially because over the next 10 years, how many retail stores are going to be left?
Oh yeah, no.
Walmart. And
they're just going to keep declining in their treatment of people. This is just shareholders trying to make a buck on you. I promise. Let retail die. It is not worth it. These are probably like 100 to maybe 500 very rich people that are going to drive thousands of people, millions into the ground so that they can make some more money. Fuck retail. Yep. Buy it all online. I know that people are like, I'm going to lose my job. Like there will be other jobs. It is not worth you living in poverty and starving because of this, because of these people. Mm-hmm. I mean, but obviously I know that there's people that are like, I need to work my job right now, and you do. But if you can start working or thinking towards another career.
Evan and I were both in that situation. Yeah. Of I have no other skill set. I'm stuck. Yeah. I can't do anything. And I tell you that if you dedicate yourself to teaching yourself something, especially in the tech industry, which is what I did, you can get out. Yeah. You just have to push forward.
Yeah, you do. It's really hard right now, but I would really start planning like another career because this one's going down and they're going to drain every last drop of blood that they can on their way down. Eat the rich. Yep. Okay. So now, and I want to say, sorry we had to miss last week. It was just too much going on, adjusting to the new job. But Barbara Smith was going to be our last person during Black History Month. And it's amazing because she fits perfectly into Women's History Month, which is when this episode airs at the beginning of Women's History Month. So that was
some perfect timing.
I mean, I don't want to say that I'm good at my job, but I'm pretty good at my job.
So I'll let you start this one off.
Thank you. So today we address a feminist icon, civil rights legend, and queer revolutionary Barbara Smith. She's 73 years old today, but age has hardly slowed her down, as she is still actively sought after by people from all walks of life. All walks of life. Okay. Smith's 50-plus years of social justice advocacy makes her one of the most knowledgeable and qualified civil rights leader in the world. An incredible feat for anyone, but especially a black lesbian born in the middle of the Jim Crow era. How did she manage to become the fierce leader she is today? Well, let's start back at the beginning.
On a chilly winter evening just a few weeks before Christmas, twin girls were born on December 16th, 1946. Barbara and Beverly Smith were born to a struggling young couple who had eloped and run away to Ohio, seeking to outrun the extreme racism of their home in Georgia. But the twins' father, Gartrell, was rejected by his wife Hilda's family. Frustrated and overwhelmed, the young newlywed mother took her daughters alone back home to Georgia. For the next several years, she raised them with support from her family. Then, when the girls were just 9 years old, Hilda Beale Smith contracted rheumatic fever and died a few weeks later.
The sisters were then sent to live with their grandmother in Cleveland, Ohio, where their father's family still resided. What happened to Gartrell Smith seems to be a bit of a mystery. It's really hard because, like I said, they were a young couple. They elope. They run away to Ohio, where his family is. Mm-hmm. But her family was always really resentful, Hilda's family. And so then she takes her daughters and goes back to Georgia. Then she dies, and the girls are moved back up to Ohio. It's back and forth. But Gartrell doesn't really ever seem to be much a part of the girls' lives. So
yeah, he was just like,
we don't really know. I don't know like, if he just wasn't ready to be a father, or if he wasn't a good person. Like, I don't know.
Their story is my story. Like, I mean, so many people grow up like this.
Yeah, exactly. So we do know that he was in the armed services, and perhaps he was stationed overseas and never came home. Whatever the reason, it was Barbara and Beverly's grandmother and aunts who raised them, and this influence would play a profound impact on their lives. The young girls saw how their aunts were treated badly by white business owners because they were black, or how their grandmother was ignored by men because she was a woman. Barbara would write later in life in her book, Homegirls, a Black Feminist Anthology, "The cold eyes of certain white teachers, the black men who yelled from the cars as Beverly and I stood waiting for the bus, convinced me that I had done something horrible." So this is just talking about how they had these strong women raising them, but they still saw the racism and sexism that was pushed against them.
Yeah, they're always just like, what did I do wrong? Everybody's just targeting them.
Right, yeah, you got to wonder, like...
Especially as a child, you don't understand. Mm-hmm. You don't understand, you know? You're just like, why are all these people hate me?
Yeah.
So throughout her adolescence, Barbara would struggle with feeling ugly and unwanted. She pointed out how there was no one who faintly looked like me being looked at as a beautiful person. The lack of representation was only one of the many issues Black Americans faced during this time. But it shows the incredibly deep impression this leaves on a child of color who only sees themselves portrayed as grotesque or broken or strange. And the local and daily interactions did not help. Barbara once had to dispute a French teacher who believed the young teen had no place in her summer French course. This assumption was based solely on Barbara's race, as the teacher completely disregarded her high grades and excellent school record.
Yeah, and again, like we talk all the time about how representation matters, and it does. Like if you're a young child of color and you never see a person that's seen as beautiful, right? Like even little things like the sexiest man alive. If for years the sexiest man alive was only a white guy, like how does a person of color supposed to ever believe that we're attractive? Or on the other hand, when you're only ever sexualized and you're only ever seen as a sex object and not seen as a full person,
right?
You know. So regardless of the many obstacles, Barbara's excelled in her studies. And when she wasn't acing her courses, she and her twin were protesting racial injustice. By their junior and senior year of high school, the two regularly participated in desegregation rallies and became active in the civil rights scene. They also joined CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, an organization that was creating quite an upheaval in the Jim Crow South of the early 60s. Just 3 years before the teens joined the movement, CORE had staged Freedom Summer, a campaign based in Mississippi which accomplished such tasks as registering over 80,000 black Mississippians to vote and creating 30 freedom schools for black children in the state.
You know who made a recent comment about the 60s?
Oh, what was that?
Buttigieg.
Yeah.
He was like, do we really want to go towards the era of the 1960s?
Yeah.
When everybody was having so many racial and minority equality, like, you know what I mean?
The radical 1960s.
I'm like, those were kind of like a really big deal. How can you?
Yeah, you mean like 1969 when you started to get your rights? You like that kind of shit. Like he's constantly like
completely unaware.
Exactly.
Completely unaware.
He only knows how to appeal to a white middle class and white rich base. He only knows how to because to him that's so radical. Like you couldn't marry your husband if it wasn't for the 1960s. So shut up. Buttigieg. This is why it's so hard to support him. He just makes me so mad, and I know that I'm going to be stuck with trying to be like, no, everybody vote for Pete because we got to have Pete in there over Trump, and it's going to be really hard for me.
You're going to be like, burn it down.
Right.
And while all of this exciting news was inspiring, it was always weighed with the gravity of violence that followed the campaign. That summer alone, 80 activists were beaten by mobs or the police, and 67 homes and churches were firebombed. 2 years later, right around the time that Barbara and Beverly were joining up, 3 core members were murdered by the Ku Klux Klan. It would be 41 years before any justice was served, and only one of the men was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 60 years in prison. Yet the tides were slowly turning, and Barbara and her sister were insistent on being part of this historical movement.
Yes, it must have been really exciting. I mean, I can't imagine, like, you obviously there's also the racism is so extreme, but to be a young person and be part of that movement, I mean, I feel like right now we are part of a big movement. I think that this era is going to be looked back at as like the 1960s were, where it's like such unrest, but also so much happened. Mm-hmm. So, and even as these young girls, it's like 15, 16, 17, they're standing there, they're listening to Martin Luther King Jr. give his speech. They're protesting, they're doing the freedom rides where you rode the buses and you insisted on sitting in the front. Like there's so much. Mm-hmm. As seniors in high school, they helped to desegregate Mount Holyoke College, and after graduation, Barbara attended the college for a brief period, but blatant racism was difficult. So in the fall, she transferred to the New School University in New York City. I don't know for sure because I couldn't get the information, but I think she attended Mount Holyoke at first just to help with the desegregation, mm-hmm. but obviously it was really tense, right. And she's like, I need to get the fuck out of here. New School was a college that had been founded to encourage progressive values and mold the new and bold thinkers. There she studied social sciences for the next 3 years and returned to Mount Holyoke to complete her degree. While the New School was the place Barbara wanted to be, no doubt she realized that a diploma from Mount Holyoke would carry more weight.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a very established place at the time, so,
Right. She then used the degree to gain entrance into the University of Massachusetts, where she earned her master's, and upon graduation, Barbara was hired on staff. One of her biggest frustrations was the lack of academic material about Black literature. I guess that's something I never really thought about.
Yeah.
Like, trying to study back then, I can only imagine, that's not ever something that was probably ever, promoted in schools.
Oh, no,
so
nothing.
I'm like
you only
especially without the internet, how do you get it? Is the library even guaranteed to have it at that point in time?
Probably not. You probably could only go to libraries in black towns, mm-hmm. or when I say black towns, areas where there was only black people, where segregation had pushed people, or you had to really search and fight for it. And like you said, it's not taught. So you're listening to all these amazing. You have to read books and books of white writers, mm-hmm. and that clouds your perspective. That's why people today will still only think of great literacy in the terms of white writers, because that's how you're taught.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's something else like white privilege. You just don't know.
You don't know. You don't think about it.
Right. So Barbara designed her own course, one of the earliest of its kind taught in mainstream universities. And along with her educational success throughout her college experience, Barbara also continued her activism. But she was frustrated with the sexism within the civil rights movement. Along her journey, Barbara had learned a lot about single-issue activism and realized it didn't serve her full identity.
So while attending Mount Holyoke, Barbara described the place as having lesbian undercurrents that nobody talked about.
Dun, dun, dun.
That sounds like life.
It's just walking down the street, there's lesbian undercurrents.
I'm just feeling a lot of lesbian undercurrents right now.
But you know what? I feel like there's a lot of gay undercurrents too, because I don't know why, but as I'm getting older, I just notice more and more things about straight men, just how they interact, and I'm like, did you two suck each other's dick? Because I'm pretty sure you two did.
Yeah, you probably did.
It's just you can just, I don't know.
Because it's what we've been saying since day one.
It really is, but it's just the way that, I don't know if it's like this in all countries, but the just way that men in the United States act, straight men, it's just they just put on this, it's this weird culture. I just don't understand it. That's why I can't interact with straight people, with straight men. I just don't get them.
Because it's just such a macho persona, but you're right. Then they'll go
It's literally like being a drag queen, but like to be manly.
Yeah.
It's always an act. Like, just be yourself.
What was that thing that people were calling? It was like a year or two ago. There was this thing. It's fuck buddies, but it was for like straight men. It was bro or fuck bro or something like that. But it was basically where they're like straight guys that have sex with men, and you're like, or straight guys that have sex with each other, and you're like, I mean, I don't care so much about the labels, but like, why are we calling this straight guys that have sex with each other? I mean, like. I don't think that's
not bromance.
It wasn't bromance, but it was something like that.
Yeah, I just.
But I'm like, but you're a straight guy and you have sex with a guy. Why can't you just admit that you like having sex with guys?
It's just I can't. I literally have a hard time interacting with straight men because I'm like, they all share the same personality, but they don't. Like, it's all an act.
I think that a lot of guys are changing that. I think that there are a lot of straight guys that are changing, but I also think that a lot of the so-called straight guys that are changing things are also a lot more fluid than they are. So that's, again, that goes back to this label. There's like, if I identify as pansexual, then people are going to be like, oh, you're just one of those queers. But if I identify as a straight guy that likes to have sex with guys, then I can kind of change the narrative. But then like,
yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. But I do know what you're saying. Like, there is this very macho, like we call it, toxic masculinity.
Act. It's all an act.
It's all an act because you're talking about how fucking tough you are, but you're right. You're going in the locker room and you're sucking each other's dicks. So then what is the fucking problem? What's happening? And we're the crazy ones.
I know. That's exactly. And when I flip the narrative like that, I'm like, how did I not see this my entire life?
Yeah, you're gaslighting us into believing that we're the ones that don't know what's going on, but we know what's going on. We're naming it. You're not.
Right. Exactly.
Lesbian undercurrents. I just walk in a place and be like, there's some lesbian undercurrents, and I'm not having it.
Oh, that would be a good shirt, lesbian undercurrents.
I was thinking. Okay. So whether she, Barbara, first explored her sexuality during this time or not, it no doubt opened her eyes to the possibilities of living openly. And somewhere around the mid-1970s, Barbara came out as a lesbian and became more involved in the Black lesbian feminist movement. I'm assuming she's done this on purpose, but there is like almost no information about Barbara's personal life. So like we know that she came out, but like when she came out, who she dated, who she's with, no idea.
You know what though? That's kind of like part of, I don't want to say star quality, but like by removing all of that personal stuff, she can make sure that all of the focus is only on her activism and like nothing else.
Exactly.
It's like, I don't care. You don't need to fucking know that. You need to know what we need to fucking fix.
Yeah, and respect that. Yeah. So her identity was especially radical even within the civil rights movement. Smith addressed the issue of male chauvinism in her interview with the Making Gay History podcast, and she stated, "There's an extreme amount, it seems to me, of male chauvinism in certain black contexts, which is a direct result of racism and the deficit of never being able to lead or have freedom in a racist country. So, to make up for white supremacy in certain black political contexts, the black men are even more chauvinistic, because they're really going to show who is boss, because they are so rightfully angry about not being recognized as capable and full human beings, in the context where white men get to call the shots. Being a lesbian feminist, as I was at that period, was about sticking holes in every terrorist value and belief."
That makes perfect sense.
Right, yeah. You take away a person's control, so then it's like kind of like that thing with like you take away their control, so they exert dominance in another area, even harder to prove that they do have control and they do have power.
Right. What Barbara experienced was the clash in her intersecting identities. On the one hand, she wanted to fight for her rights as a black American, yet often found the right of her gender and orientation ignored. Consequently, within the feminist movement, she often faced racism and homophobia. These issues pushed the young black activist to incorporate an all-encompassing approach to social justice. This is exactly why queer people of color have led the way in our country's civil rights revolution. It is precisely because of their intersecting oppressions that they are able to see the many sides of the coins. Whereas single-issue activism may yield a quicker and more resounding result, multi-issue activism yields more substantial and longer-lasting results. This is why Smith, to this day, continues to avoid organizations and communities that shut out other oppressed peoples.
Right. But it's like, we see that again and again. And that is why when we say queer people of color who lead the revolution, and folks are like, well, what about this person? What about this white guy? What about this white girl? It's not saying that white people weren't obviously involved, but they were, and we're going to talk about it, they were involved only for their what they needed, their issues. Mm-hmm. They weren't involved in creating an actual revolution, but queer people of color were in these intersecting identities where they're like, okay, well, we have to address several things, because if we don't, then we're really going to be screwed. Mm-hmm. So, but where then is a black lesbian feminist to go in the mid-1970s? Having no other resources, Barbara partnered with her sister Beverly and their friend Demita Frazier to found the Combahee River Collective. The name itself spoke to a powerful statement of black feminist power. On the night of June 1st, 1863, into the wee hours of the second, Harriet Tubman led 150 Union soldiers deep into Confederate territory. Using intelligence gathered from runaway slaves, Harriet and her command raided the coastline of the Combahee River, destroying plantations and estates while rescuing over 750 slaves. In the entire ordeal, only one person was killed, and 100 of the newly freed men promptly joined the Union Army, making Harriet Tubman the only woman to have led a successful military campaign during the Civil War.
I actually did not know that.
Yeah? Is that incredible? One night she did that. She's like, they're like, all right, Harriet, I guess you can help out. And she's like, motherfuckers, watch me. I'm going to free 750 people.
Because she knows. And not only does she know, she can, like, once she knows that once she, like, tells these people, like, let's do it now, like, they're going to immediately join her. Yeah. She had no opposition, probably. Yeah. I mean, obviously the slave owners, but, like, they instantly were like, okay, we're siding with this bitch, bye. So, like, all of the slaves probably just turned on their, you know what I mean? Like, there's probably just this massive, like, boom.
Well, that was a whole thing. That was exactly why the slave owners were so afraid, because they knew that they were far outnumbered by their slaves. And if anybody started a revolt, like, they were going to be fucking screwed. Yep. And that's what Harriet did. She went in there, and then they burned those plantations, burned all their crops, and just like, fuck you, motherfuckers.
I can't believe I never knew that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And that's just that thing, like I was talking about, how it's just not taught, so we just don't know.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's on me for not looking into it.
I mean, like you said, we're not taught, you know, but that's why you read Black authors. That's why you read Black history and Latino history and Asian history and Native American history. That's why you read other people's histories, because you didn't. I just finished a book. The story was incredible. The book, I have mixed reviews, but it's on the Puebloan Revolt, and it's talking about the natives that were in southwest of the United States. And when the Spanish came over, and that a period from about the 1590s until the early 1700s, and how the natives fought back so hard against the Spanish, and how the Spanish, you know, used their guns and their horses and their superior so-called firepower against them. But again, stories that but there was this amazing revolt that happened where after 80 years of oppression, the natives banded together and they pushed the Spanish out for 12 years. A story that we would never be told.
Wow.
Because if you don't read those histories, you won't know those histories, and then you won't have a balanced perspective on history. That's also why it needs to be taught in schools.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So it was with great pride that Barbara Smith and other Black feminists chose the name Combahee River Collective as the title of their new organization. It was radical and open to all, describing itself as a class-conscious, sexuality-affirming Black feminist organization. And while Combahee was just what the movement needed, it wasn't what many civil rights activists or feminists wanted. In February of 1980, the final meeting would be held, but not before Barbara and her friends went out with a bang. This resulted from Barbara's 1977 piece, Toward a Black Feminist Criticism, and member Shirlane McKay's powerful essay in 1979, I Am a Lesbian. In both pieces, the woman addressed the rainbow elephant in the room. There were such things as Black lesbians, and they were just as involved in the fight for social justice as everyone else.
Yeah, and we talked about this a lot before. So you're kind of stuck in this thing where the civil rights movement doesn't want to admit that there's any gay people. Like, we don't have any black gay people, right? That's where Bayard Rustin falls in.
Yep.
And the feminist movement wants to act like lesbians aren't crucial to them. Like, fucking lesbians. I mean,
do you want somebody to come in and beat somebody's ass? Like, do you want that group of people in here?
No, but like lesbians like formed the original suffragette movement. I'm not saying that straight women didn't play a huge part or weren't even equal parts, but I'm just saying that, like, to say that lesbians have not been carrying the way on women's rights, it's really mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
One day we're going to talk about the suffragette movement.
Once you come in already having something, you don't need to think about the history.
Well, exactly, right? It's your. We're going to talk about that. It's your privilege. You're like, I don't need to worry about this. Like, we're fighting for women's rights, and no, we're not going to fight for your right to be with women. But even as far back as the Daughters of Bilitis episode, we talked about how straight feminists were trying to push lesbians out. And you're a black woman, you're a black lesbian feminist, and you're like, the civil rights movement doesn't want me because I'm a lesbian, and the feminist movement doesn't want me because I'm a lesbian. Well, fuck all you. I'll start my own thing.
Yeah.
In 1978, Smith was invited to speak on the first panel ever about black women writers. However, no other lesbians or even feminists were invited to speak. How do you talk about black women writers and not invite at least the feminist? Right? So despite her pleas to include more lesbians and feminists, Barbara read her essay and all hell broke loose. A prominent member of the group got up as soon as Barbara had finished and stated, "I have sympathy for my sister, but homosexuality is the death of the race." In the back of the room, several of Barbara's friends watched helplessly as she was berated, insulted, and harassed by her fellow black writers. Among those watching was the esteemed author and proud lesbian warrior, Audre Lorde.
Though the Combahee River Collective was closed down, Barbara was not through. In 1980, she, Lorde, and several other women of color launched The Kitchen Table, Women of Color Press. While it was always a modestly small organization, its legacy as the first publisher for women of color was hugely impactful. Because of The Kitchen Table and breakthrough essays like Toward a Black Feminist Criticism and Homegirls, a Black Feminist Anthology, other authors such as famed Toni Morrison were able to have their work taken seriously. For the next 12 years, the woman at The Kitchen Table would produce and publish some of the most critical literature of the day. But in 1992, that chapter in Barbara's life closed when her friend Audrey passed away from cancer.
Smith continued her fight for equal rights for all, while also providing deserved criticisms within her own movements when warranted. She had been protesting for LGBTQ rights since the late 70s and continued to do so, yet she was disappointed in the way the movement began to mirror early black civil rights activism. She wrote in a 1993 essay, "When lesbians and gay men of color urged the gay leadership to make connections between heterosexism and issues like police brutality, racial violence, homelessness, reproductive freedom, and violence against women and children, the standard dismissive response is, 'Those are not our issues.' At a time when the gay movement is under unprecedented public scrutiny, lesbians and gay men of color and others committed to anti-racist organizing are asking, does the gay and lesbian movement want to create a just society for everyone, or does it only want to eradicate the last little glitch that makes life difficult for privileged white male queers?"
Sounds a lot like what's going on today.
Exactly. This is what, like 28 years ago, and you could have read it today and been like, same fucking thing. Come
really
on,
could.
guys. Come on. This is why we need a queer revolution and not the gay rights movement. Oh, she continues on. The article continues on. Go ahead. You read it.
If the gay movement ultimately wants to make a real difference, as opposed to settling for handouts, it must consider creating a multi-issue revolutionary agenda. This is not about political correctness. It's about winning. As black lesbian poet and warrior Audre Lorde insisted, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Gay rights are not enough for me, and I doubt that they are enough for most of us. Frankly, I want the same thing now that I did 30 years ago when I joined the civil rights movement and 20 years ago when I joined the women's movement, came out and felt more alive than I ever dreamed possible. Freedom."
What Barbara points out here is the foundational difference between the gay rights movement and the queer revolution. The two stemmed from the same circumstances, yet one evolved into a white-led, conservative-based, heteronormative structure, and the other was carried by black and brown people, heralded as a radical agenda, and defied the binaries of our social system. For most of the late 80s far into the 2000s, the two groups could not have been the more polar opposite. The white-based LGBT groups pled for tolerance as they ignored the needs of marginalized people in their own community, and queer revolutionaries threw up their hands in disgust as the gay rights movement became the white, lesbian, and gay movement. It wasn't until the late 2000s into the 2010s that major organizations began to experience a shift toward embracing outside the white binary realm.
And while we could attribute this to the evolution of understanding and empathy, there is also the practical point of a concept known as It's a crucial aspect of critical race theory, and we took the following definition of the concept from an NPR article by David Shee. Interest convergence is a theory coined by the late Derek Bell, law professor and spiritual grandfather to the field of study known as critical race theory. Interest convergence stipulates that black people achieved civil rights victories only when white and black interests converge. The signature example is Brown v. Board of Education, which happened because it advanced white interests too, Bell argued. Specifically, desegregation raised the nation's prestige in the world politics during the Cold War. Eventually, when interests diverged, the enforcement of civil rights was curtailed. Brown was undercut by later cases that sanctioned segregation for decades. Bell pointed to later affirmative action triumphs examples of renewed interest convergence.
So we see this again and again where it seems like white people are just becoming enlightened and progressing, but in reality, they have an agenda.
Yeah, and they're going to get something out of it. They're going to look good or
exactly
something like that.
Whatever you need. And so, I think we talked about this a little bit in one of our previous episodes, but I don't know. But we talked about the Civil War, right? Like the Civil War was the North trying to free the poor black slaves, and the South was trying to oppress them. But in reality, the North was comprised of a lot of very poor white farmers who could not compete against the plantation owners of the South. Also, the North was trying to create an industry where they could trade with Europe, but Europe had outlawed slavery, and Europe was having a problem with the way that America continued to allow slavery. So between the poor white farmers and America trying to establish relations with Europe overseas, they suddenly realized, hey, if we end slavery, we can better our relations all around. The poor white farmers won't have to compete with the plantation owners, and we can establish better trade connections with Europe. And so this works out better for us. So this was not, and we know that that's true because if it had been just about freeing black people, we would not have had Jim Crow right after they were free.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So for a moment, our interests converged. We
or
freed
they
black
would
people.
have thought, on top of freeing them, how are we going to integrate these people into society?
Exactly. But it was never about that. In fact, we know that Abraham Lincoln was incredibly racist. And I mean, everybody was racist. Mm-hmm. But the point is that, so again, for a moment, the interests converged, so we ended slavery, and then when our interests parted, white people are like, okay, thank you, we don't need you anymore, you can go back to living on the other side of the tracks or whatever, you can continue in this
good luck
new
out there.
form. Yeah, this new form of slavery that we've imposed on you called Jim Crow. And the same thing, Brown versus Board of Segregation, a lot of people don't know that our schools are more segregated today than they were in the mid-1960s. And they're more segregated today because of the way that white people have set things up. Because it was never about being equal with black people or equitable. Mm-hmm. It was always about separation.
And now the Democratic Party wants to do all this criminal reforming. And, if you get rid of felonies, you're going to get rid of the felonies probably of a lot of, younger black people who are caught up in the system due to a minor drug offense, and they'll have the right to vote. And guess what? If they have the right to vote, they're probably going to vote for the people who freedom. Makes perfect sense.
Exactly. It's all back to interest convergence. Mm-hmm. It makes sense for us to free you because then you'll vote for us and you'll keep the white people in power. Yeah. So as explained above, when black and brown people's white counterparts see a benefit in extending civil rights to all, they jump at the chance. However, in times when it's not perceived as beneficial to support marginalized parts of the community, white individuals will ignore their needs and demands. And though interest convergence specifically applies to matters of race, many of the same themes can be found in other aspects of the queer community, such as the way transgender and gender nonconforming individuals were virtually ignored by mainstream LGBTQ organizations until the early 2000s. And even then, it wasn't until several independent studies were made by trans and non-binary people supporting their claims that cisgender counterparts saw an opportunity to gain state and federal funding. Thus, the interests converged as it now became profitable for cisgender LGB people to support the trans and GNC gender nonconforming community.
In the social justice world, there have always been people crusading for their rights, and people crusading for everyone's rights. Barbara Smith is a woman who has always fought for equal and equitable rights for all people. And that's why she walked away from the mainstream LGBTQ movement. In 1987, she was one of only 8 speakers to address the over 1 million queer people who marched on Washington. She had been among the very first 100,000 LGBT marchers at the state capitol in 1979. Yet by the mid-90s, she saw a group overtaken by a desire to conform, something the queer revolution has never been about. We are the people who defy the laws and standards and socially constructed gender roles. We break the barriers of love and acceptance. We promise an image of a world that could be, but in the 90s, whether through fear, selfishness, or ignorance, LGB leaders left the non-conformers behind, and it would be nearly 2 decades before attention would drift to the so-called others again.
But while she left the mainstream movement, she by no means abandoned her queer siblings. In 1999, Barbara and several other activists wrote an open letter to the Millennium March organizers. It was titled, "Will People of Color Pay the Price?" and detailed the abuse and willful blindness towards the needs of queer minority groups. Yet the letter went unheard, and that was the final march on Washington that Barbara Smith attended. Instead, she poured her energy into multi-issue organizing, which she continues to pursue to this day. She founded the website Stop Islamophobia several years ago and published a 40-year work in 2014 titled, "Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around, 40 Years of Movement Building with Barbara Smith."
Over the years, she's won many awards, including the Stonewall Award in 1994, and was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize in 2005. She's also had several pieces of her work archived, and she is one of the most sought-after literary teachers in the country. Yet at the heart of it all, her passion remains for freedom and justice for all. Just last year, she wrote a scathing piece in the New York Times. Staying true to the message she's preached over 55 years of activism, Barbara concluded her article with these words. Gaining rights for some while ignoring the violations and suffering of others does not lead to justice. At best, it results in privilege.
It's an excellent way to sum it all up, and it's true.
It is.
You know, and you got to stay committed to those multi-issues. Like, you've got to, it's freedom and justice for all, okay? If it's not everybody, then we're not doing it.
Right.
It's just fucking how it is.
You're just oppressing another group even further.
Yeah, we're not leaving a race behind. We're not leaving a religion behind. We're not leaving disabled people behind. We talk about marriage equality. What about the marriage equality for people with disabilities? Like, what are we doing to make sure that everybody has equal and equitable justice?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So your recommended resource is the book Homegirls, a Black Feminist Anthology, or watch one of Barbara Smith's many lectures on YouTube. We linked one in our page titled God Don't Like Ugly and She's Not Too Stuck on Pretty Either. And most importantly, make sure you are supporting organizations that promote and focus on the needs of all people. This means they not only recognize that marginalized individuals have more needs, but they are actively trying to meet those needs. Be aware and stay committed to justice for all.
So stay queer.
Don't get a lobotomy.
We love you, our little allied hookers.
And a little succulent sapphists.
And our proud homocrats.
Proud homocrats. Have yourself a sodomy circus and be aware of those lesbian undercurrents.
Because they're everywhere.
The queer undercurrents are everywhere.
And if you haven't joined the Queershin family on Patreon yet, you should give it a look. Even for just $3 a month, you get to hear more of us.
You hear more of us, and you support the queer community, because that goes into our queer mentorship program where we help young people who are transitioning out of toxic environments. So you're doing good, and you're supporting us, and you get to hear all of our thoughts on everything more than you do already.
Bye.
Bye.